Welcome back to the Green Room podcast. I'm your host, Garon Green, and I'm incredibly glad that you're here with me today. Whether you're listening to this on an early morning walk while the mist is still hanging low over the local fields, or sitting in your car staring at the steering wheel, trying to gather the strength to go inside, or sitting in an empty house where the silence feels so loud it's practically vibrating. Pull up a chair, take a deep breath, drop your shoulders, and this space is entirely yours for the next hour. So today I am diving in deep into what I call the architecture of silence. We're talking about the spaces left behind when life splits open, the heavy weight of loss, the raw reality of grief, and the deep systemic loneliness that follows a bereavement, a relationship breakdown, or a sudden shift in your friendships. It is a terrain that touches every single human being on this planet, yet is something our modern world handles with massive clumsiness. When society hears the word grief, it usually thinks of a funeral, it thinks of a physical death. But as an integrative counsellor, I see every day that the longest, hardest part of grief isn't just necessarily the funeral, it's also the aftermath. It's the devastating grief or quiet grief of losing a partner, or a marriage where the person is still walking the earth but is completely gone from your life. It's a sudden jarring vacuum in your daily routine. And right alongside that relationship trauma comes another hidden heartbreak, the quiet shifting and sometimes total evaporation of your friendships when you go through a particular life crisis. The pain of realizing that some of the people you thought would be in your corner forever simply cannot handle your darkness, leaving you standing entirely on your own. And if you found your way to my practice at GaronGreenTherapies.com, or you've listened to this podcast before, you know that I don't sit in my clinical chair tossing heavy academic jargon at you. I don't look down from a pedestal. I've spent 16 years, nearly 17, working within addictions, homelessness, and mental health charities before during my also 10 years within private practice as a psychotherapeutic counsellor. I've looked at the world from different concrete floors. I've crawled my way out of addictive addiction, and I've faced homelessness. But beneath all of that, my life has been a masterclass in grief and isolation from a terribly young age. And long before I wore the badge of a therapist, I was a young guy watching the world get stripped back. From an early age, I started losing friends, not to just old age, but to the brutal realities of terminal illnesses, devastating drug overdoses, and the quiet, crushing tragedy of suicide. Later down the line, unfortunately, I got to witness my stepfather, who again was going through a hell of a lot of difficulties, getting systematically dismantled by the cruelty of motor neuron disease. And unfortunately, I managed to watch a grown man body become a prison, navigating that agonizingly slow and brave goodbye. I have known so much loss, and every single one of those losses hurt deeply. They left permanent marks, but nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day I lost my mum. My mum was my ultimate source of emotional support. She was my absolute rock, the one person who saw me through every dark mile of my life with unwavering pride. When she left this world, I was completely and utterly heartbroken. It was completely different level of pain, accompanied by a crushing, profound loneliness. And I'm telling you this definitely not for sympathy, but for more transparency. Because every single mile of that dark terrain, every tear, every moment of absolute panic and hollow numbness has molded me into the therapist that I am today. I don't understand pain because I've read it in a psychology book. I understand it because I have breathed it. I have lived it, and it has taught me how to sit in the absolute dark without flinching and helping you to be able to find your way back out. And today is about your story, your grief, and your survival. We are going to build a hard hitting therapeutic toolkit specifically for you to handle the pain of possible isolation. And I'm going to look at the traditional stages of grief through a fresh lens, applying CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, to catchy, unhelpful loneliness, thoughts, and spirals. And I'm going to bring in some DBT, dialectic behavioral therapy, to give you more concrete tools to survive within those moments when the emptiness feels like it's literally suffocating you. So take a deep breath. Let's drop the armor, step into the room, and look at this together. So let's talk about MAPS. The amazing Elizabeth Kubler-Ross famously gave the world 5 stages of grief, which we have denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Over the decades, society has twisted into a neat, clean, linear checklist. But grief is a pinball machine. It's a chaotic storm, and the absolute core engine of that storm is loneliness. Loneliness changes how these stages manifest, transforming them from clinical concepts into a deeply painful, solitary experiences, and take a slow, degenerative loss like the disease of motor neuron disease. When you watch somebody battle with MND, you don't just grieve when they pass away. You experience what we call is anticipatory grief. Your experience, the 5 stages every single week, watching the slow motion fade of a proud man. By the time the physical death actually arrives, you've already died 1,000 miniature deaths alongside them. But compare that to the sudden shattering trauma of finding a loved one pass away. And when I walked into that room and found my mum, it shattered every rule in the textbook because of that amount of loss I already survived in my life. My brain seemed to have developed a strange, hyper efficient defense mechanism. And when I found her, I seemed to process reality at lightning speed. I held my mum in my arms and I looked at her. My mind shifted almost instantly into a brutal, freezing acceptance of truth. I knew she was gone. My brain registered the finality of it immediately. Yet right alongside that instant acceptance, a massive, desperate wave of bargaining was happening at the same time. Heavily driven by the sudden trauma of loneliness, while I was holding her body, knowing the truth, I was internally pleading and raging that this wasn't how the story was supposed to go. She was supposed to be there with me always. She was supposed to walk beside me through the rest of my days. And that is bizarre, surreal duality of traumatic grief. Your brain can roll over in mourning denial. Your thumb automatically type in a text to someone before the freezing cold reality hits you is, I can't send them that text anymore. I can't ring them anymore. And I found, it's been just over 3 years since my mum's passing. I found I've kind of not gone into that habit probably over the last year of being able to text or call my mum if anything happens in life. I've been entirely alone with that. You can be holding the reality in your hands, fully accepting the worst has happened, while your heart is still actively negotiating with a universe that has just rewrote your entire life. And when a relationship ends or when you lose young friends to over overdoses or suicide, That bargaining and anger turn inwards. You get angry at your ex for moving on while you are stuck in the ruins, or you find yourself trapped in a relentless, agonizing loop of what ifs regarding a friend's passing or suicide. What if I had picked up the phone that night? If I had just stayed awake for an hour longer? Could I have changed that trajectory of their life? That is your grief trying to escape the agonizing quiet of the present moment. And then you can drop into depression, the heavy, hollow baseline of true loneliness. You look at the weekend stretching out in front of you, entirely empty, and the depression tells you that the silence is your permanent state of being. You're you aren't just grieving a person, you are grieving a shared life. And if you are bouncing in between these stages 20 times a day, if you go from furious anger to desperate bargaining to total numbness because of the silence of your life is overwhelming, you are not broken. You are a human being navigating the massive landscapes of isolation. Stop trying to force your pain into a neat format. Let's be wild. Let's be messy. And while you were trying to process the emotional storm of a loss, a secondary earthquake often happens, which can be your social circle shifts. And the isolation can sometimes deepen. This is where obviously CBT or cognitive behavior therapy can become quite an invaluable tool, because the thoughts you have about your loneliness can easily trap you in deep, dark loops. When a major crisis hits, whether it's a brutal breakup, a bereavement, or a deep depression, we naturally assume our friends will rally around us to protect us from being lonely. But the raw truth is that life crises act as a giant filter on your friendships. And have you experienced this recently? You're going through hell, and suddenly certain mates become incredibly quiet. They stop inviting you out. They send superficial, hope you're okay texts, but avoid any real deep conversation. Or worse, in a breakup, mutual friends start taking sides, and suddenly you feel entirely cut off from your community. The phone stops ringing, the negotiations, notifications dry up, and the silence settles in. When this happened, your brain loves to jump to a specific cognitive distortion called personalization. Loneliness tells you a story. They are pulling away because I am a burden. I am too depressing to be around. If I were more fun or less broken, people would want to see me. I'm fundamentally unlovable, and that's why I'm alone. So let's apply some CBT evidence testing to that thought, if you like. So, when friends pull away during your crisis, it's rarely actually about you. It's almost about their own emotional limits. Your pain forces them to look into their own vulnerabilities. If you're going through a divorce, it forces people to look at the cracks in their own marriages. If you're struggling with mental health or deep grief, it triggers their own unhealed shadows and their profound discomfort with raw, messy emotions. Many people live in absolute terror of the dark mile. They strip back because they don't have the emotional muscle to sit with you in the wreckage. Their absence is a reflection of their limitations, not your value. But when you internalize that absence, you layer the tyranny of the shoulds directly onto your loneliness. I should have a massive group of friends by this stage in my life. I shouldn't be this lonely where there are people around me. I should be strong enough to handle being alone without crying. Every should is an unhelpful rule that creates secondary dirty pain on top of your clean grief. It turns the natural pain of isolation into a weapon of self shame. So let's do a quick CBT thought check for your life right now. If you feel abandoned or caught in trauma flashbacks of finding a loved one, ask yourself these three framing questions. Am I mind reading? Am I assuming they think I'm a burden? Or is it possibly they are just overwhelmed by their own chaotic lives and don't know how to handle your own raw pain? Number two is, am I globalizing? Are you telling yourself everyone leaves me? I am entirely alone in the universe. Or can you look closely and find even one person, a sibling, a colleague, a solid mate, or a therapist who's still standing there? And number three, can I reframe this filter? Instead of seeing the loss of these friendships as a personal failure, you can see it as a painful but necessarily clearing of the ground. It's a sorting mechanism that shows you exactly who the depth and the courage to walk with the real, raw, unfiltered version of you. And now, sometimes loneliness isn't just an unhelpful thought pattern or a quiet evening. Sometimes loneliness is a profound, deep rooted trauma that gets physically trapped inside our nervous system. When a loss is so catalysmic that it shatters your entire worldview, the resulting isolation can feel like a terrifying, permanent sensory of deprivation chamber. Your brain gets stuck in a loop, unable to fully process the memory of what was lost, leaving you in a living constant state of chronic survival mode or complete freezing numbness. If you've listened to the podcast recently, you know that I had an absolute powerhouse of a guest in the Green Roofs podcast, an amazing guy, Lee, from an organization is therapy practice is There Is a Light Therapy. And Lee is a phenomenal therapist who specializes with men's mental health, trauma, and grief. But what really makes Lee so incredible isn't just his clinical skills, it's his profound lived understanding of the dark mile. Unfortunately, Lee and his partner suffered the ultimate, most unimaginable loss a parent can ever experience, which was a loss of a child. As a therapist and as a man, I can only imagine the crushing subterranean depth of that pain and the terrifying absolute loneliness that follows when a child is torn from your life. To have your world fractured in that way, to face that devastating void and to find a way to not only survive it, but to turn around and hold a lantern for other men walking through the dark. That is a definition of true resilience. And Lee has also written an amazing book about his journey and his work, and he is doing really vital things out there. So if you are a male who's been through, unfortunately, a loss of a child, please do have a look and Google There Is a Light Therapy. And Lee is a EMDR therapist and very passionate and very good what he does. So, shouts going out to you here, Leah, and hopefully I'll be getting you on the podcast again soon as we've spoke. And so, yeah, please do have a look at his website, and that's There Is a Light Therapy. If you Google that, you'll find Lee and the amazing work he's doing. And when we talk about the traumatic loneliness of loss on that level, traditional talking therapy can sometimes reach a structural limit. When you are processing trauma that deep, your brain's emotional center, the amygdala, remains stuck on high alert. That's why sitting alone in a quiet room can trigger a massive panic attack years after the event. Your brain interprets the quiet space as an immediate psychological danger zone. That is why specialized trauma support is so vital. It's about learning how to help the body process what the mind cannot articulate, which works through the somatic, visceral weight that settles into a man's chest when he thinks he has to carry his grief entirely alone. And if you are a man listening to this right now and you've been told by society, just man up, bottle it up, and carry the weight of your loneliness in silence until your chest feels like it's going to explode. I want you to look at guys like Lee, their immense power in stepping forward, acknowledging the trauma of isolation, and seeking out a specialist spaces where you can lay the shield down and integrate your pain. You don't have to carry the raw shock of being alone forever. There is light on the other side of the tunnel, but you have to be willing to look at the architecture of your silence to find it. And whether you are utilizing a CBT to check your thoughts or doing deep dive trauma work, there are still going to be those moments where the visceral ache of loneliness hits you out of nowhere like a physical blow. And neuroimaging studies show that social isolation and emotional heartbreak activate the exact pain pathways in your brain as physical injury. Loneliness lives directly in your body. Your throat closes up, your chest tightens, and your nervous system screams. And in DBT therapy or dialectic behavioral therapy, we talk about balancing this intensity through a core concept called radical acceptance. Radical acceptance means completely, fully, with your mind, body, and soul, accepting reality as it is in this exact split second, because fighting reality only can create suffering. And if you think about the sheer amount of energy you might spend right now fighting the fact of your isolation, I shouldn't be alone tonight. My life shouldn't look like this. Why did everyone leave? Every ounce of energy spent raging against an unchangeable present is energy drained away from your capacity to survive it. When you drop your hands, stop fighting the fact of the empty room and say, this is my current reality. I am entirely alone right now, and it hurts like hell, but it is what it is. Your feet finally touch solid ground. You accept the pain of the loneliness so you can stop creating that secondary suffering through resistance. And to help visualize this, let's bring this back to the grief ocean analogy. So imagine you've been shipwrecked and you're stranded in a middle of a vast, unpredictable ocean. In the early days of your loss and your sudden loneliness, the waves are 80 feet high. They crash over your head every 3 seconds. You don't even have time to catch a breath. The wave of missing an ex or a wave of realization that a loved one has gone forever hits you and you feel like you are literally drowning in the isolation. And in that stage, you cannot fight the ocean with raw willpower. You cannot build a wall to stop an 80-foot wave. The only way to survive is to learn how to float. You take a breath when you can. You look at the wave of loneliness in the eye and you ride up and over the crest, trusting that the wave will eventually break and drop you back into trough. As time moves on, the ocean changes. The waves of loneliness don't disappear completely, but they are becoming spaced further apart, hitting every 3 weeks or every few months. And when they hit, you recognize the feeling. You can look the emptiness in the face and say to yourself, oh, okay, I know what this is. This is my loneliness wave. It's hitting me because it's Friday night or because of an anniversary. I've survived this wave before and I will float through this one too. When you are trapped in a massive wave of isolation right now, the urge or spiral or engage in destructive behavior hits just to escape the quiet. And behavior gives us an immediate distress tolerance tools called the TIP skill. That's TIPP, to physically reset your nervous system. So we have T, which is temperature. So change your physical temperature immediately to break the loneliness panic loop. Go to the sink and splash freezing cold water on your face or hold an ice cube tightly in your hand. It triggers the mammalian dive reflex and forcing your heart rate to slow down and pulling your brain completely out of the emotional spiral. We have I, which is our intense exercise. So give that pent up, restless, anxious energy somewhere to go. Run until your lungs burn. Do push ups until your arms shake. Or punch a pillow. Burn off the stress hormones built up from being isolated. Then we have P, pace breathing. Breathe in deep through your nose for the count of 4. Hold and breathe out slowly through your mouth for a count of 6, making the exhale longer than the inhale. Actively signals your nervous system that you are safe in this room right now, even if you're alone. And then we have P, the paired muscle relaxation. Tense up your shoulders as high as they can go. Squeeze your fists tight for 5 seconds and drop them completely. And feel the physical transition from total tightness to absolute release. The wave will pass. It always does. You just have to stay in the boat. And sometimes when with my private clients, I can take clients out for walk talk therapy in the countryside here in West Oxfordshire in Milton under Witchwood. And they can often sometimes talk about the sheer emptiness they feel after a major loss. The silence in their home or their social calendar feels deafening. They look at open space in their lives and they see it as a threat. But it seems to be when you walk out in nature, you realize the empty space isn't a bad thing. In the autumns, the trees have to drop their dead leaves. It looks bare, it looks cold, and it looks completely isolated. But if the tree held on to those old dead leaves all through winter, it wouldn't have the capacity or resources to grow fresh green leaves when the spring arrives. Nature doesn't rush its seasons. Winter doesn't apologize for being dark and bare. It takes exactly as long as it needs to prepare the soil. Your life requires that same patience. You cannot force spring to arrive early in your heart. You cannot force meaningful connection into our winter of loneliness. You have to let the ground clear first. And as you look at moving forward, remember Lewis Tonkin's model of growing around grief. Imagine drawing a circle on a piece of paper and shading it completely with heavy black ink. That black circle is your grief, and it is the vast void of your loneliness. It represents the full magnitude of your loss, your breakup, your bereavement, your shattered dreams. In the early days, that black circle of isolation fills the entire page. Everywhere you look, you just see the black ink. And moving forward doesn't mean that the black circle of loneliness magically shrinks. The weight of what you lost, the space they left behind, doesn't fade into nothingness. Instead, what happens is that your life grows bigger around it. You start intentionally drawing a larger circle around the black ink and you put one foot in front of the other. You take a gentle walk, you listen to a piece of music that moves you, you find a safe therapeutic space to work through the trauma, you have a brief cup of tea with a friend who actually stood by you, where you connect authentically. You invest your energy into your own passions, your work, your well being, any hobbies that you have. The loneliness stays the exact same size, but your world expands. Suddenly, there is room on the page for the quiet and the room for the new life. There is room for the deep historic sadness and room for profound joy. They coexist. Choosing to live fully, to laugh again, and to build a beautiful new foundation doesn't mean you love what you lost any less. And it doesn't mean that you are pretending the void isn't there. It means that you are choosing to fully inhabit the life that you still have left to live, allowing your circle to grow until the silence becomes a space of peace rather than a space of pain. And we are coming to the end of this short talk. And if you've listened through all these chapters and sitting in your own quiet space, I want to take a moment right now to just acknowledge yourself for showing up, facing your pain, and looking at the architecture of your loneliness. And that seriously takes massive, massive courage. So let's take core anchors out of the room today. So, number one, we throw away the societal timeline. Loneliness and grief are messy, non-linear, and circular. Give yourself permission to feel the empty spaces without judgment. Number two, challenge the isolation narrative. Catch those CBT thought spirals. Challenge the shoulds. Stop telling yourself you're a burden and stop personalizing the limits of friends who didn't know how to show up. And number three, lay down the protective armor. If your loneliness is tied deep seated, painful survival loops of sudden trauma, find a specialist space to unpack that heavy somatic weight. And number four, let your life grow around the ink. You don't have to rush to fill a void. Learn to float through the waves. Build your own foundation and let your circle expand at its own pace. And I also, in regards to this loss and grief, I highly encourage everybody to check out Lee's incredible work and pick up his book. You can find him There Is a Light Therapy if you type that in on Google. He is a phenomenal guide, especially for men trying to navigate the heaviest loneliness trains of life. And if you need a safe, grounded space to sort through your own wreckage out here in West Oxfordshire, Milton under Witchwood in the Cotswold, remember what it says on the homepage of my practice. You don't have to walk the dark miles alone, even if you feel entirely isolated in your room right now. You are part of a community listening to this exact message today, and we are walking this together. So hit subscribe here on Spotify if you don't miss up our upcoming sessions in the Green Room podcast. And if you'd like to pick my brain about anxiety, depression, addictions, loneliness, and grief, feel free to reach out to me at GaronGreenTherapies.com. And there's never any stupid questions. And, I'm very open, authentic, and real, and I will meet you with compassion. And be incredibly gentle with yourself today. So make sure you hydrate, especially in this heat, what we got going on here in the UK. I can feel myself sweating just from this podcast. I think that's why it's a little bit shorter than usual. And even take a walk if you can and breathe. And my name's Garon Green, and I'll see you next time in the Green Room podcast. We do have another project coming up with a couple of friends of mine, but I'm sure you will see from episode 3, I think it is. Eddie done his talk in regards to his own journey. So we have got a new podcast coming up called Rent Table, and it's going to be a group of people speaking about various aspects of mental health. And I'd really, really love your support on that. And I'm quite excited. So recording will be happening, I think it's the 4th of July. So hopefully the weekend of the 4th of July, there'll be a new podcast put out with a group of people speaking about various types of mental health. And if you need to talk to somebody, reach out to a professional or even get in touch with myself at garongreentherapies.com, and I'll do the best I can to support you. So until then, take care of yourself and plenty of grounding and self-care. And any worries or concerns, feel free to reach out to me. This is the whole purpose of this podcast is reaching out to that person who, that one person who's struggling. I'm not here for clicks. I'm not here for fame. I work in this field day in, day out, which is quite exhausting at times. But at the same time, I get to meet some amazing, just mind-blowing people who have had to survive through really tough times. I think I've probably have nearly 6,000 hours of therapy hours now. And it's been such a journey to them people, my clients, present and past. I sincerely thank you guys from the bottom of my heart, because where I grow, you grow. And I want to say thank you to you as well to helping me grow my practice at garongreentherapies.com. So look after yourselves, and I will speak to you soon. Take care. This is Garon Green signing out from the Green Room podcast.